Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Q&A with Laura Massey today. I'm incredibly excited to have her on. We got quite a lot of questions already, even before today's event. So I'm very looking forward to our chat. Please feel free to post questions during the event as well, if something comes up while we're talking, and I will try to show the questions as I see fit with the topics that we talk about. Yeah. And before I bring Laura on, I just want to do a quick introduction of myself in case you haven't met me and you just got this invitation on LinkedIn. So I do English training for academics, researchers, and writers. So probably lots of you that are joining us right now on LinkedIn. It's mostly one-on-one online training and also workshops every now and then. And now I have added this series of expert interviews that I hope to continue for the next months at least, because I think it's quite exciting and I hope that it brings value to whoever's watching today. And my mission is to help academics, educators, and knowledge workers to communicate confidently, to basically not feel sweaty and nervous and embarrassed about any time that you have to speak English with colleagues or at conferences or at networking events. I want to support you to work internationally, to go after this research semester abroad in New York, maybe, or in South Africa and Sydney, and to build sustainable language routines that don't just feel like you're doing 2 weeks of English and then after everything is gone, but to be sustainable, to help you keep speaking English for a long time to come. I studied in Oxford and in Harvard, so we have the two flags here. I lived in the UK, I lived in the US, and now I'm living in Sydney, Australia. So I've kind of covered many bases in terms of English accents and dialects as well, which is quite exciting. I really enjoyed it, and Sydney is a wonderful place to live in. And now, which is even more exciting than what I'm doing, I would like to talk about what Laura is doing. Besides being a wonderful and very lovely person, she is a very experienced and highly trained academic translator, editor, and proofreader, which is what she's here for today. That's the role I invited her for, the expert, the role that she's taking on, and she's specialized in working with non-native speakers of English to achieve maximum clarity of ideas and structure. And she also, which was originally why I reached out for her, what I really enjoyed is that she highlighted that she wants to keep the individual writing voice. And I think anyone who's joining right now, you probably have quite a bit of experience in writing and you have your own writing voice in your native tongue. And it might be difficult to keep that voice when you're writing in English. So that's what Laura is working with you together. She likes to work collaboratively and to kind of keep that voice, keep your personality in your writing, whilst also making sure it sounds natural in English. And her focus is on humanities and social sciences, and she has been published in a variety of different journals, as you can see here. And now I'm welcoming Laura to the stage. Hello, good morning.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you so much for coming and for taking the time today.
Very happy to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, also, like, we did a trial run last week, and someone actually, I don't know whether Rachel is watching, but someone actually did join, which was quite interesting. But this is the real thing now. So this we're actually gonna do properly.
We're here for real. Yeah.
Nice. Okay, Laura, so I have one thing, especially for those people that are joining and that haven't met you before, and most probably haven't met me either.
Yeah.
How did you become an editor and proofreader, and why do you enjoy working with languages and texts?
Yeah, so good question. So I studied at Oxford initially. I studied languages, modern languages. And then following my degree, my undergraduate degree, I did a course in publishing straight after, also in Oxford for a year. And during that time, it was just one of those things. The people on the course were working in various different jobs, and we used to just pass the jobs between us. When one person left, they would say, here's a job if anyone wants it. And so I sort of fell into editing at Oxford University Press on that basis, and I worked there for about 6 months as an in-house editor. And then off the back of that, I worked in publishing. So I worked for Blackwell Publishing, the academic publisher in Oxford. Not editorial. I was working sort of in a more administrative role on a books list for theology and religion. And then, as things happen when you're in your 20s, I then moved away. I got married, I moved away, and I began my family, and that was it for a while. And then, again, slightly fortuitously, my husband got contacted by a colleague of his. He's a doctor, and the colleague said, I hear Laura is good with words. My sister needs somebody.
Good way of putting it.
He said, my sister in Brazil is the editor for a journal of psychiatry. And by this time, I also had a degree in psychology. I did that when my children were being born and quite small. I did that sort of alongside motherhood, which was not easy. But I had by then got 2 degrees. I've got one in languages, one in psychology. So psychiatry seemed quite a sort of natural fit. So I did that. I worked for her for a while, and from there she passed my name to other people. And before you know it, I'm not doing psychiatry anymore. I was doing neuroscience. I was doing Alzheimer's. I was doing autism, epilepsy, for just a vast number of academics in Brazil. And so that was where all of my experience initially came from for editing non-native English. And then it snowballed from there, really. I did loads of that, and then I added translation further down the line, and things have just gone on from there. So that was sort of 2009 up to 2015, started doing translation, and then that's where I am now.
Wow.
So sort of lucky, but then I worked hard once I got into it. So yeah.
Amazing. I have so much respect for people who study whilst working and also whilst having kids. Like that's like I have not had to do it. Yeah. Wow. How was it with your background in languages to go into things that sound very like natural sciences kind of direction, like psychiatry? Yeah. How did you find that?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because of course it wasn't a subject that I had studied. I mean, I think I was lucky that my husband was someone on hand to ask. He'd done a PhD, he's a neurologist, so neuroscience was, you know, I had an expert on hand who I could ask to say, is this what you say? Because there were so many phrases and styles of writing that wouldn't suit me. You know, as a humanities student, as an art student, I would sit there and I would go, I wouldn't say that. That sounds awful. And he would say, yeah, that's what we say. So it was very much like learning a new language for me, you know, and I would have to get to grips with, you know, sort of something that I didn't think was ideal, but was completely normal for that environment. And also not over change. That was the other thing, because I could have cut that whole thing to shreds and I really wanted to, but I had to learn just to stop and just accept that for me it wasn't ideal, but for them it was perfect. So it was really interesting. So I really was just dealing with their English rather than necessarily their style. And so I had to learn to let go a bit as I was doing it, but it was interesting.
Nice. I think that's probably why some people might be joining today, because it might feel like a different language. Like you're used to writing at university, and then you kind of go, you stay in academia and you want to start publishing, or maybe you have published a lot in your native tongue.
Yeah.
And then it comes to writing in English, and you kind of like, ooh, like kind of like the questions you just said, can I say it like this? Is this an accepted way? Is this phrasing okay for history or for social sciences, kind of like, which is what you're doing now, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, and I'm native English, and I was still struggling with that, with the neuroscience text. You know, it was almost like I was learning a new language. So, but you know, like everything else, with practice, it got a lot easier. reading an awful lot of different texts, it got a lot easier. And then also, obviously, with my husband asking an expert, you sort of pick it up and you feel more confident eventually by doing that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Talking about asking an expert, Laura, can I ask you the next question, which is connected, obviously, to what we just talked about?
Yeah.
When you get a text, like with all your experience now, 15 years, which is quite a lot of text and words that you've read, I would think.
Yeah.
What does a text need? So this, like for everyone watching now, like if you're submitting a text to Laura as an editor and proofreader, what does a text need in order to impress you? And you open the document, you have a first read, and you are like, wow, this is quite, I don't need to do anything. This is really well written.
Yeah. So I would say that it's not necessarily perfect English that will impress me, because obviously if it's coming from somebody who isn't English, I'm not expecting it to be perfect. If it was coming from someone English, I wouldn't necessarily expect it to be perfect. But the things that impress me in a text when I open it and read it are that I find myself at the end before I know I've got there. So that will be the flow of the argument, the clarity, the structure, the signposting. That's a big one, so that you read and you know where you're going as a reader. So so as a reader, I'm looking at it going, as a reader, do I follow what's being said? Can I see the flow of the argument? And that comes from having a really strong backbone of structure, knowing where you're going to go, knowing what you're saying. I would say also concision, so not having your sentences too long, so that they're easily read and you pass on and you understand and you move on. And so clarity, concision, and then also not using overly complicated language. If your ideas are already complex, you don't want to complicate it by using very difficult language as well, because your reader is going to struggle to understand all of that. So I would say so clarity, structure, flow, I think are the things that make me impress me the most.
Wow. That I 100% agree with that. And it also reminds me, I had a wonderful chat with Paulina the other day was part of an amazing LinkedIn Live event. And we started to get into the conversation of like complexity versus simplicity in terms of writing. Because especially in academic writing, maybe some people watching now, they're like, well, but I need to use certain jargon because it's expected of me in my field. And otherwise it wouldn't be academic writing if I just use everyday language.
Yeah.
But then now you're saying if you use too complicated language, it will
affect how people understand it. Because I know as well that if I read a very complicated text in English, you can read it 3 times and still not quite know what it's talking about, and you certainly wouldn't pick it up for fun because it's sort of overwhelming. Having said that, of course, if you're writing for your field and for your colleagues, you are going to be using language that the everyday person is not going to be able to, easily pick up. But it doesn't mean that you can't, so certain words are going to be complicated, certain jargon will be signposted to people who are experts in your field like you are. And yes, of course, you'll use those words, but I don't think that your sentences need then to be overly complicated. You don't have to pile in loads of clauses and that's and whiches, and it doesn't need to be that. So perhaps your sentence structure then can be more simple. It's all about enhancing readability and knowing a bit who your audience is, I think, as well.
Yeah, 100%. Like, is it kind of supposed to be open to the public to an extent, or is it really just an article for 20 experts worldwide?
Absolutely. In which case, go as complicated as you like if they're all going to understand it instantly, but if there's any chance that someone who's less expert is going to read it, you don't have to explain every single difficult concept, because obviously if people are seeking that out, they're going to have some knowledge probably. But there are definitely ways that you can help your reader, I think.
Yeah.
And knowing who they are is definitely the first step in that.
I agree. I just realized I was like so caught up in the conversation. So there are some comments, people saying, hello, hi Asal, hi Beata, hi Lucy, amazing. And Lucy is saying, so true, Laura. So I think, yeah, some people are agreeing with what we're saying, which is always good. Although, please do disagree. Like, you know, if you
Yeah,
have different
absolutely.
experiences.
Yes, after all, this is only my opinion, so what I found.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I did. Oh yeah, you have mentioned signposting twice. And just for those people watching that might not be familiar with that term, could you give like maybe an example of what you mean by that?
So I would say signposting is where you would initially say what you're going to talk about. It seems, yeah, it seems quite sort of, it seems like a slightly clunky thing, I think. So you sort of say, I am now going to explain this, and then and so that may be your first paragraph. And this is why they often say write your introduction at the end, because then you know what you've said, and then you can put that signposting in because you know exactly what you have said already. And then you literally go on and say, and now I'm going to talk about this. And then at the end of the paragraph, and now I'm going to move on to talk about this. And then so that your reader is really, it's like hand holding, I guess, in a way, isn't it? So you know at any one stage where you are in the text and what is being discussed, and the progression. You know, I'm going to talk about this, and then I'm going to use that to discuss this, and then I'm going to use that to discuss this, and then I'll bring it all together and discuss it at the end. At which point your reader can relax because they know exactly where they're going, and they can just sort of enjoy the ride, I guess. They don't have to, worry about getting bogged down, because you've helped them out enormously.
Exactly. I think my when I work with people, obviously I don't work as an editor, but we also sometimes in one-on-one work, or when I teach at university, we also work on writing. And sometimes I tell my students or my clients, like, don't overestimate people's ability to focus on your text. Like, you hope that they are 100% present and have rested perfectly and, have had 2 cups of coffee to focus. But it might not be the case when they read your text. Like, they might have all kinds of stuff happening in the background. So make it easy for them. Like, and if you think this might be a little bit too much in terms of saying, like, in the next paragraph, blah, blah, it might just be what they need, your readers.
Absolutely. And you imagine, people don't have huge amounts of time. Some people in academia, they're doing lots of different things all at the same time. People in everyday life, they don't have ages to spend on something. And if they get bogged down, they're not going to pick up your message. And I think that's the important thing, is that, and that's the thing what I was saying earlier about when, stuff that impresses me, I've got to the end before I know I've got there. So I've not got bogged down. I've gone right through it, and that signposting is really helpful for that purpose.
Yeah. And just so people just look it up. Like, if you've never heard about it before, and if you're kind of wondering now and you find out that the thing we just talked about intriguing, it's definitely worth looking up. Okay, Jane Turner just said your audience may know the terminology, but they might not have to they don't want to have to wade through multiple complex clauses. Yeah,
absolutely.
exactly.
And it's almost like complexity doesn't impress. I think even people in English think it does, and it doesn't really.
Yeah, I agree. All right. So what else? Because we did have lots of questions from the audience too beforehand. I reached out to most people that registered. Maybe this might be a good next question. It's kind of connected to what we talked about. So we talked about like things that you should focus on: clarity, focus, a good structure. Make sure that like you use signposts to your readers what you want to do. And now we look at it from the other side. Like, what are some issues that you come across again and again? If you want to, I know you're working mostly with German and Italian texts as well. If you can, like just maybe some examples and how can we avoid making those mistakes?
Yeah, so I think, the mistakes that I come across again and again, and obviously I've done a lot of texts that are not sort of German and Italian so much, but would have come from a Portuguese speaker, because I've done an awful lot of editing for Brazilians who write in English, but I can tell how Portuguese is put together, even though I don't speak it, because of the way they write in English. And obviously they're using, and I would say their biggest issue is prepositions, using the correct preposition with the verb. or using one at all sometimes, because it can change the meaning if you don't use them. So I would say that's one that I come across again and again and again. It's just using the incorrect preposition with a verb. And it's something that really highlights a non-native speaker, I think. But that is probably also true in any language, I would think, because it's, sometimes what preposition you use is slightly idiomatic, and how would you know? Sometimes incorrect conjunctions, the bits that sort of connect your sentences in the middle, like whereas or thereby, or that kind of thing, and sometimes they can sound a little clunky. So sometimes you don't need them at all, but you quite often find them in there, and they might not be necessary. There may be another way of doing it. Either cut the sentence off, start again, you could put in a semicolon, whatever, but sometimes they're used a bit incorrectly, and it can sound a bit, and it can make your sentences quite unwieldy if they start to get longer and longer. I would say making life a bit complicated for yourself is something I find a lot. So I have an example here, I've written it down, so it's going to read off my screen. So I've got here the sentence: the main problem with this drug is that of side effects, which is fine, it's not necessarily incorrect. However, you could just cut that down to the main problem with this drug are the side effects, and then suddenly you cut out about 5 words, and that suddenly makes your sentence quite a lot clearer. And then so overcomplication is a mistake, I would say, and it's easy to fall into. And I think that's where having a slight mastery of English, or just showing it to somebody who can help you just cut it all down to size, is really important. And then sentence order, and that is something that I see in Italian and German as well as the Brazilian, is just putting things in a slightly weird order in English. And I know in German that can come from, and I see when I translate German as well, that they put so much before the noun that then needs to be unpicked and put after the noun in English. Like a Struktur enden or something. You can't say a structure, you can say structure changing, but you're more likely to say something that changes the structure in English. In Italian, obviously, you have to deal with quite a formal level of Italian. It's kind of quite flowery, quite abstract, and that doesn't work in translation at all.
I think when we did the mock trial run last week, we also talked about what might have been then, or might have been like when we chatted another time. But it was, I think, about like there's so many nouns in German and so many nominalizations that you use, which in German is fine, and it actually, like, that's how the language works, and we just use lots of nouns. But that's like, at least when I work with people, and I think we talked about this a little bit, in English we just have more verbs. Like there's just more active stuff happening, and you can't, especially those compound nouns in German where you have Schifffahrtskapitäns, blah blah, some like these like huge words, you just can't express them in the same way.
No, because that, if you translated that directly, it would sound so odd in English. I really admire German for that, because it's nothing, it's so easy, isn't it? It's just so, it's like I stick it all together, and I know, and everyone can read it in one word, and that is not possible in English. You can't do it, and it will not sound natural. So you have to unpick it, and as a translator, it's hard work, because you have to work out. You have something which is one word in German, and you have to make it into a clause in an already long sentence. What do? You end up having to split the sentence or something, because so it's really mind-bending trying to translate it as well into anything that sounds concise, I think.
Natural.
And natural.
But I think, oh, sorry, Laura, go ahead.
Sorry, no, I was just going to say, all of this will come from reading, though. That's the thing. The more you read in English, the easier it will be, because you will click into the way it's written, because it will be written more or less the same every time you read it. So that's where you can learn how to do that. Exposure,
that's
feedback.
One of the things. I mean, obviously, I would think, if people are thinking like, how can I? Oh, well, that's actually one of my questions. Haha, there we go. Past Julia already prepared this. which points should be on my checklist if I want to proofread and edit my own writing. It's kind of, I guess, maybe like organically moving on in our conversation.
Yeah.
So if we keep the
Um,
things in mind, so we have to use signposting, a clear
mhm,
structure,
yeah.
make sure that we take people by the hand, maybe over communicate in terms of
I think
telling them what we're
it
doing.
might sound a bit strange, it's not something you'd say out loud necessarily, but yeah, you do need to take people a bit by the hand so that they can focus on your arguments, I think, and not wonder where on earth you're going. And it's all of this is in preparation, isn't it? So you have to know where you're going, what you're going to say, and then you need to choose the right words to say it, and then you need to know who you're writing for. I would say also, if you want to proofread and edit your own writing, you probably need to make sure that what you're doing is consistent. So things like spelling and grammar, not so fussed about that in some ways, because actually, they exist on Word. You can do that if you want to know what it is. Word will tell you, and they will tell you how to spell things properly and correct grammar. I'm going to say Word is. I don't think it's 100% foolproof on the grammar, but the spelling's not too bad. The grammar sometimes I disagree with. So
Laura's
sometimes
value judgment of the word.
I don't think I'll be following that one. But they both exist and you can use them both. So, so your focus is then more like, is the bit that you can control, which is what you're going to say. But I would say sort of in terms of like the slight nitty gritty, you've got to be consistent. So if you're using UK spelling, don't suddenly start using US spelling halfway through. So don't change ISE to IZE halfway through, and don't think you can mix and match those, because you can't. If you're going to start with one, stick with it all the way through. So know, and also know whether you're writing in US. If you're writing for a publication, it's good to know whether they want it to be in US or UK English, so you can do that from the word go and you haven't got to change it later. So be consistent with that. And then just, I suppose that, so that's what I would say, is be consistent and know where you're going with your arguments, I think. And then that's initially, and then if you're still concerned about whether or not it sounds English or not, then you need to go and find somebody who's native English to do that for you, because then you can be 100% certain that it will be fine.
Yeah. Would you say it makes sense to do like 3 rounds? Like the first round, when I proofread my own writing, I think about structure and topic sentences, and then the next round I think about cutting down sentences if they're too long, and then the next round I look at spelling. Or do you like, I don't know how you do it yourself.
That's
What
going
would
to,
be like the best practice for people?
I think people are going to find their own way with that, whichever way works for you. So I know if I'm editing someone's work, I will initially just read it through, because I haven't seen it before, so I need to know what it says. So I will read it all the way through, and I will try really, really hard not to change anything, even if stuff. I don't quite always follow that rule, but I try hard not to fiddle at that point. Partly because I've been a bit burnt in the past by fiddling and then realizing that actually it was an important part of the text, or that, as I was saying with the neuroscience text, that I would change it, but then I realized that is how it has to be. So I have learned now not to touch it until I've read all the way through once. And then the next bit will be more of the nitty gritty. Then I'm going in and I'm correcting things that are really obvious. And I might then chop some sentences if I think they're really unwieldy. And then when I've got it clean, I will take away all of the editing marks and I read it through as if it's a clean text, because I can't read it through when it's covered in red lines. I need to be able to read it through as a text. So we'll do that, and then I will see if there are any bits that jar when I read them. Sometimes I use this read out loud function and get it to read it to me, because that's helpful. And then often I leave, and then if I can possibly do it, I'll leave it and I won't touch it, and I'll come back a day or two later, and it's amazing what hits you then. You didn't
just sleeping on it, but I also just wanted to highlight, like, sorry.
No, that's what I was going to say. Just sleeping on it, and I do it with my translations as well. Exactly the same. Sleep on it, come back to it, and you'll be struck all over again as if you've read it for the first time. So,
hopefully not in a negative way all the time. Like, oh gosh, what did I do yesterday? I need to do it again. But the reading out bit, like I also keep telling that to people, and it seems like such a simple piece of advice, but it's actually I don't think a lot of people do that, especially with longer text, because it does take time
It does
to
take
read it
time.
out. But then when you
Yeah.
read it, like often you're like, oh yeah, the sentence might actually be too long because
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm talking about when I got to the end of it. So you might have to cut it in the middle or something.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think it is. It's quite useful, and but I think people do have a voice. I know I certainly do. When I'm reading, I've got a voice in my head reading it out. So it is yeah. I guess it's like the voice in your head, but out loud. So yeah.
Yeah. All
Mm.
right. So we have half an hour. I know. So Laura said she has 10 extra minutes, so we're gonna go a little bit over time. But before we get to the questions that were sent in, do we have any questions in the? Okay. All right. So we have. Okay. Lucy also says more verbs in English, and the French use more nouns as well. So French seems to be similar to German then,
Yeah.
at least in writing, not in cuisine. And then, okay, Asal says for international exams like IELTS, they say it's
I
okay
know.
to
I read
mix British
that.
and American.
That's always been such a no-no for me. It's always been if you start with one, stick with one. But if they say it's okay, I guess you have to follow what they say. But I think on the whole, that's not something that I would recommend anyone to do because
Yeah,
it
maybe
looks a bit nasty, I think.
I have the same reaction. I also keep telling people, I mean, because you have more time, I think that's a different thing with publishing and writing. You have, hopefully, you take more time to prepare your writing than at
Yeah.
IELTS. Like you're literally under time pressure. And I would think with IELTS, maybe as long as your spelling is correct, maybe they're being lenient, which is not something I often hear about IELTS, but like,
Yeah, no, absolutely.
okay, all right. So, before we go to the Q&A section and to the questions that people send to me, I do want to, if anyone is wondering now, I do have some articles sitting on my laptop. I just haven't got around to proofreading it. I don't feel confident proofreading it. I would like someone to read it over and maybe also meet up with Laura and have a chat about it. Maybe just understand what's going on. So these this is her website, her email address, and her LinkedIn profile. I don't know, like Laura, can you say something about what kind of projects you're open to and your availability?
So I do sort of, I suppose, mostly academic translation in humanities, social sciences. I've just been working on a text on sociology for a German university, and that was a chapter in a book, which was terrific, and that was a collaborative project with other translators, with another translator.
Nice.
So that's the sort of thing: dissertations, chapters, journal articles. I've worked on letters of application for studies in America. So people who are writing, hoping to be taken on for doctorate programs, that kind of thing as well. So all sorts, multifarious things, lots of different audiences, lots of different voices, and lots of different subject matter, which I think is always great. I really love it. I love not quite knowing what's coming through the door next, because for that period of time you become very knowledgeable on it, and it's really interesting.
Yeah, I can echo that sentiment because I have the same with my clients. Like I really enjoy, kind of like with every one-on-one client that I have, sometimes I had someone who worked kind of with ethics in IT and AI, which I was like, oh my gosh, that's fascinating. So it wasn't just IT, but it was like the ethical, philosophical part of it. I did have someone from religious studies. I had people from teaching German as a foreign language. So it was, as you said, I really enjoy kind of diving into those worlds and then
it's fascinating.
learning also.
Absolutely. But that's obviously when I say I'm collaborative, that's what it is, because actually I am not an expert in those subjects. I can come into it, but sometimes there's words that are used and particular jargon and sometimes particular sentence structures that are used, and I will need to know from the person who's written it what those are, or at the very least go off and ask somebody else. So I so it's so from that point of view, that's why I like to collaborate, because I know I'm not the expert, but
You're the language expert.
The language expert, exactly. But in order to get the product in, or to the end result needs to be it's because it's not my name on it at the end of the day, you know. So I need to make sure that it's as good as possible, because someone else's name is going to be, that's their reputation at stake, you know. So I'm very conscious of that when I'm working. So I do try and get everything as right as I can as I go through. Yeah.
Of course. I mean, yeah, I highly recommend Laura. I've seen her work. And also, if you look online at her website, there's different client testimonials as well. So, yeah. So if you want to reach out, do reach out to her. There's different ways. And so let's get into the questions. So what do we have? Yeah, we have a few minutes. All right. So this I thought was really interesting because I keep seeing this pop up, and this is basically like the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing. But I wanted to hear your take on this. So Michelle asked,
that's difficult, isn't it? And I think it would be really difficult, because you will have that slight feeling of imposter syndrome, you know. And I know, having been abroad, you know, you think, oh gosh, so much better than I am at this, aren't they? So how do you ask for help? That's a very good question. The problem is that if you keep getting negative feedback and you're not doing well, then eventually you would hope that somebody is going to say, you need to go away and work on this. You need to go and find some help, and actually potentially finding someone like an editor who is not connected with your academic institution might actually be quite a good way of doing that, because it's something you can do in private if you don't feel like you can ask somebody. And you know, you can work with them to improve. And obviously, if you get feedback, you can act on the feedback, change things. But I think, and also potentially, if people are worried about asking, then perhaps laying on some support for them and building it in, so they have to go to it without necessarily asking for it. That might be a good idea as well.
So when people kind of design doctoral programs, or when they design, you know, I guess programs for maybe junior professors or something, that it's mandatory to go through academic writing training.
Yeah, and then I'm so sorry if you can hear that. I've got someone drilling outside my door.
No worries.
Sorry.
It's not live. So that happens.
I didn't hear what it was either. Sorry, I've got a workman in.
I can still hear you really well, Laura. So no problem.
Sorry about that. It's just, I've got a dog on the floor as well down here. I'm hoping she's not going to go off. So I think having it built in is probably quite good, and you know, at least at the beginning. And it's almost like making sure that everyone's sort of on a level playing field potentially before they, you know, get started on some serious writing. And also perhaps getting some feed, you know, sort of getting them to do something, bring it in, and then having a look, and then maybe identifying the people who you think might need the support, and then just giving it to them without them having to come and ask for it. Potentially, that might be quite good.
So making it part of the program, making it mandatory maybe, and also what you said in the beginning, trying to find a safe space. This could be an editor, this could be a language trainer, hello, or writing, like Dr. Nina Fischer, who I recently had a very lovely chat with. Like for example, she's doing a co-working writing session every 2 weeks on a Friday. So that might be, you know, finding a space away from your department where the pressure is not on as much.
Completely. Sort of doing it a bit in your own time, I suppose, as well. If you're aware that you've got, you know, you might be worried about it unnecessarily, and you may be fine, you know, but sometimes actually just even finding that out gives you confidence, doesn't it? That actually it's not as bad as you think. But you know, but potentially if it is as bad as you think, then seeking out help and having things laid on for you might be helpful, to be able just to kind of pick people up who might need that extra support.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, let's see. There was one, where is it? Oh, here we go. Okay, so Susanna would like to know, could you share any personal routines or habits that help you to translate, edit, or write better? So if someone is wondering, like, I never get to it, procrastination, these kind of things.
Yeah, so I'm not. Yeah, luckily I don't necessarily suffer from procrastination too badly. I think yeah, on the whole. So I've said what my editing process is. So, you know, I come back to it again and again. And I would say the same is true as translation. I do a translation and then I come back to the translation and then I'll come back to the translation again. So I think so those routines, this habit of kind of dipping in and coming in and out of it is helpful, because you do pick something else up every single time you come back. I would say something that I have done in terms of my translation that's been really helpful is I have joined 2 translation revision clubs where we have just, as colleagues, come together and we have a text. We all do a translation on the text. We put them side by side and we look at them together and we say, oh, that's good. And then you look at other people's and you might think, oh, that's really good. And because as a translator, we work on our own a lot, we don't get a lot of feedback. And it's a way of really honing, why do you say that? Why are we saying this? Does this work better? You know, and it has just elevated my own translation practice, like skyrocketed it through the roof. So that's been really helpful. I've been doing it probably about for a year or so. And it has been, I think it's been great. So that sort of collaborative working is, you know, it's a little bit scary because you are putting your translations out there and being open to criticism in a way. And sometimes you do get to, you know, it's like, I don't think what you've done is right there. And actually, you know, it's quite hard to take, but actually it's really helpful ultimately. So I would say that's something that I find really helpful.
That is such a, okay, I think I will. So one last question. I know we haven't even got, I will connect you with the rest of, like, I have way more questions that people have sent in, but I don't want to, you know, I'm sure you have other things to do today, Laura. But so you just talked about human connection, working collaboratively and working with other people. So where is the aha, okay, same person actually. But like I have got this question from many people.
Yeah,
So you
that's
just
really
talked
interesting.
about working with other humans, working collaboratively, like working with people actually in a, you know, co-working space, in a club, in a some kind of safe space.
Yeah.
So how does that compare with AI? Like, how do you see the impact of AI on translation and editing? This is the
Yeah,
last
so
question.
it's a really big topic of conversation because obviously AI can, you know, could potentially take away the work of translators altogether, really, because, you know, anyone can put something to AI and get a reasonable translation at the end of it. So I think on translation, it's impacted quite a lot of the sort of what you might call the bread and butter translation. So things that are quite standard, like terms and conditions, or, you know, the sort of documents that tend to have the same wording over and over. Those, I think, not necessarily all the time, but sort of that sort of bread and butter translation, people don't necessarily always need that now. So that has dropped away quite a lot. And probably editing and proofreading, similarly, you've got spell check, you've got grammar check, you know, that would take away some of the work of an editor. However, with both of them, I would say that at the end of the day, how are you sure that what you're reading at the end of it, if you are non-native, is idiomatic native sounding English? And the answer is you don't know that. You can't be sure. And AI is not, and everyone knows it's not foolproof yet, or, you know, ever, who knows? So that's when the human translator and the human editor comes in, because they will be able to tell you whether it is or it isn't. I had a translation recently where they had put it through AI and they sent it to me and they said, if it's awful, retranslate it, and if it's reasonable, edit it. And it was reasonable, it was all right, but it was certainly not native sounding English. It wasn't publishable, no, but it was good. You know, there was no denying it was fine. But I would say also, in terms of staying relevant, I think you see it a lot. People say niche down is what they say. You know, pop yourself in a niche, find your hole, find the thing that you can do that is something that AI can't do, and then, you know, and do that and make yourself known for that as well, I think. Yeah, so that's a big one, isn't it? Yeah, but it's changing.
We just opened Pandora's box towards the end of our chat today.
That's just my 2 pence worth. You know, I think also, and there's a lot of diversifying as well. I think translators are diversifying quite a lot, doing more writing, more creative writing. Yeah. So I think
Yeah.
diversification, like a lot of
English
industries
deep
that
dive.
impact by something, you have to adapt or die, isn't it? You know, you have to diversify, and you have
Yeah.
to change a bit what you do. Yeah.
I think for a last question of the chat, that was a really, really good answer because I just put you on the spot, and it's I'm
Yeah,
sure we could have a whole Q&A just about that topic and could have all kinds of experts on it from different perspectives.
definitely. Yeah, there's a huge amount out there, isn't there? A lot of concern and worry about it. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's both. Like you can use it. I mean, I use it in my work with critical thinking and
Yeah.
but it's helpful, but it's also you need to be careful with it, how much you just copy and paste out of it and what
Yeah.
it makes up. And yeah.
Yeah. No, it is. I mean, it's no denying it's, it's useful. Those AI overviews I get, they can be very handy. And
Yeah,
so yeah,
I
so
know.
it's not all bad. My son is using it at school to find sources for a long essay he's writing, and that's been really helpful, because how otherwise would he find those? So it's definitely got its uses.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. All right. So I think we should probably call it in my case, a night here in Australia because, yeah, it's been 45 minutes and
Yeah.
I told you 40. But just last thing, if anyone is interested in signing up to my newsletter, I'm just going to leave this here. You can pause it and read through it. It's English in academia, language learning, productivity, events, Q&As like this. Just scan the QR code and become part of the community. It's really fun. Otherwise, thank you so much, Laura, for your time. I really appreciate it. I could have gone on forever, but I'm not sure if everyone would keep watching forever. But yeah, I found it really, really interesting. I mean, I love writing in English anyway, so this is, I would do this in my free time with some scones and some hot tea
Yeah.
on a Sunday. I don't even need to be paid for it. But yeah, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you.
All right, so everyone, let's leave comments. I'm going to read it afterwards. I'm going to upload it to YouTube. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you, everyone, for watching, if you watch it after the recording. And I hope to see you at the next event. Bye.
Bye.